Namaste.
Namaste. Namaste, namaste. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. How are you, sir?
Very good. Very good.
Namaste and welcome, Krishna Das. We are so honored to have you today on the behalf of the Temple of Cosmic Religion, which is the organization that my grandfather and my guru, Sadhguru Sant Keshav Das, had started back in the
Ah,
late 60s when he came here to the West. Um, and what an honor it is for me to be meeting you once again, albeit it's virtual this time. But this is the way we have to meet these days. So
that's true.
any which way it is, I'm so honored, and it's the grace of the Lord, and of course our gurus who are so kind to give us the grace to be able to continue their missions in our own ways, and of course be in each other's presence as well. So I
Yeah,
don't know.
I'm so sorry I didn't get a chance to meet Saint Kashyap Das. Really, I don't know why not. It just didn't happen.
Yeah.
Later on, I met some of his devotees out in California. Some very wonderful people, but
Yes.
I don't know why I wasn't able to meet him.
Yeah. It's that's the destiny, But we still come across great beings as you did, and you're not a man who needs much of an introduction, but
Unless you can tell me who I am, that would be really great. I'd like
well,
that.
I think we're all trying to seek that. But the thing is, there are some people, few people probably out there who don't know you. So I'll still give you an introduction.
Okay, I'll
Uh,
take a short nap while you do this. Okay.
um, but Krishna Das is a world-renowned kirtan performer and kirtan wala, as the North Indians refer to them. Of course, you've done it on a global stage, global level, toured so many different places and done this wonderful, your kirtans and chants, which are so uplifting. And of course, you have several albums under your label, which is Krishna Das Music. Some beautiful, beautiful albums. I have all of them. I enjoy
Excellent.
listening to them all the time,
Thank you.
especially when we start the day. I think it always starts my day in the right way.
Very good.
And of course, you have some books that you have written as well. And one that I was reading, I think the one most people highlight is The Chance of a Lifetime, which is your
Ah,
autobiography. Really beautifully written. I would say it's a must read for anybody who would want to know more about Krishnadas and his spiritual journey and his life.
and what not to do in life.
Sure,
What
yeah,
not to do.
yeah. Well, what not to do and then what to do.
Yeah, what not to do and how to recover from
But even for those who aren't into the chanting or maybe even spiritually inclined, I would still say it's a great read because who knows? By the time you finish that, there may be a seed planted somewhere. So I think it would be, I highly recommend it. Of course, you've started a Kirtanwala Foundation as well, which is to promote the teachings of your great divine master guru, who is Anim Karoli Baba. And you've also performed on the Grammy stage. Was that back in 2013?
it. Yeah, that sounds right. Something like that a
Yeah.
while ago. Yeah.
That's a really cool thing. I'd like to know more about it a little later. Um, and really, uh, it's incredible. Like I said, to have seen you live in concert as well in 2019 when I was able to see you in March when you came to Washington D.C.
Acha.
So yeah, so that's when
Yeah.
I got the good fortune of hearing you live and of course meeting you the next day during the workshop. Um,
So
but
you survived the workshop, huh? Very good. Very
survived, and
good.
I wanted to still talk to you.
That's it shows you're probably as crazy as I am. That's okay. At least we're in the same club.
Yeah. Krishnadas, if you don't mind, because the basis of our discussion and what really the gist of what we are going to talk about is your spiritual journey and the chanting that you do as a practice every day, and what is really a huge part of what your existence is. So if you don't mind me sharing some of my chants with you before we begin our discussion.
Sure, as you like.
Yeah, so I'd like to go ahead and chant what Sant Keshav Das Ji, our Guruji, used to teach before each and every one of his lectures and discourses.
Wonderful.
We'll chant Om 3 times. We offer our salutations to the ever-living light, everlasting light known as the Guru, the principle of the Guru who's always guiding us. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha. Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Gurubhyo Namaha. Guru Dattatreya Maharaj Ki Jai. We pay our salutations and obeisance to the remover of all obstacles, Lord Ganesha. Om Akratunda Mahakaya Koti Surya Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakarishu Sarvada Om Gam Ganapathaye Namaha. Offer our salutations to the Holy Mother in all her forms. Om Sarvamangala Mangalye Shive Sarvartha Sadike Sharanye Trembake Gauri Narayani Namostute. Om Dum Durgaye Namaha. Om Aim Saraswati Swaha. Om Shri Mahalakshmi Namaha. Om Shri Mahakalikaye Namaha. We offer our salutations to Lord Shiva. Om Trembakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityor Mokshiyamamratat. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Salutations to the goddess Mother Gayatri, the mother of the Vedas, who opens our intellect and our mind for that spiritual energy and that knowledge to download into our minds. Om Bhurvasvam Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodayat. Our salutations to Lord Sri Ramachandra, who showed us the idealism, the ideal path of how we should be. Om Apadam Apahartaram Dataram Sarvasampadam Lokabhiramam Shri Ramam Bhuyo Bhuyo Namamyaham. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Lastly, we offer our salutations to the Jagat Guru, the Guru of all Gurus, Lord Sri Krishna himself, who gave us the wonderful teachings in the Bhagavad Gita. Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramarthanam Devaki Paramanandam Shri Krishnam Vande Jagat Gurum. Om Klim Krishnaya Namaha. Om Klim Krishnaya Namaha. Om Klim Krishnaya Namaha. And I'll end with the Maha Mantra. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you very much. Krishnadas, this is, like I said, such a privilege for me to be connected with you. And I'll tell you a little bit about, before we begin talking, I'll tell you a little bit about how I was introduced to you, and actually to your guru first. Uh, One of my grandfather's disciples, lovely couple, who are actually, I consider my godparents. They live in the Pittsburgh area, and they had an album of Jay Utal, who is your Guru Bhai, right?
Huh, sure.
You know, they had gifted that to my father, and I enjoyed really listening to those chants. And that was the first time I think I kind of, other than my grandfather's disciples, that I actually heard an album where there were kirtans being sung
Huh.
by a Westerner. So that really captivated me, and I really enjoyed it. And that was right around the time when the internet had just started to become a household thing. And so I could search more about him. So when I had searched about him, that's how when I came to know he's a disciple of Neem Karoli Baba. And I think I had seen your name referenced somewhere in some of his interviews or something that you know, there weren't that many videos back then. So we weren't able to see what we can see now.
Yeah.
But it was cool to hear his experience. But many years later, I sort of got disconnected from that. And then many years later, I think maybe about 3 years ago, right around on the day of Shivratri, I was searching YouTube to find some Shiva bhajans or something to listen to, you know, to get my mind in the feel of Shivratri. And I had come across Omnamashivaya, which is one of your hit songs
A big hit.
albeit your first album.
Yeah.
And
Second. Yeah.
was it your second album? Okay.
Yeah, it was my second. I consider it my first, but it was really my second.
Okay.
Long story.
Pilgrim Heart, right? So that song, I remember it. Whoever mixed it on YouTube had some slides of visuals of Native Americans, but it was
Really?
the audio was, you know, sort of the underlying thing, and then they had these for the visuals. It was Native Americans, but it was so powerful. Right from the point where you hear that chanting and the priest chanting, and then you delve into the song, it was really goosebumps, and you really feel some amazing positive vibration. And really, the hair was standing up and probably everywhere.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is so cool. I have to send this to everybody. So I was literally sending that song to all my friends, and some of them responded like, hey, that's pretty cool. That's a nice song. But then, you know, I was like, I got to play this in the car tonight when we're going to the temple. So I played that for my wife, and we both were just silent and just enjoying it. Otherwise, she's usually saying something to me, you know, even if we're playing something where I'm like, I want to listen to this, she's usually saying something, but we were both silently, engrossed in this song.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I started to actually listen more to you and your music and your chanting, and started searching more about you and learning more about you. And that's where that connection back to Neem Karoli Baba came. And ever since then, I've been a fan. And I'm so fortunate that a year later, like I said, I was eagerly awaiting more details about your tour, because I was like, I have to catch Krishna Das the next time he comes live. I've missed it all these years. And when I saw that you were coming to DC, I was quick to get the tickets, and I wanted to be part of both your concert and the workshop. So it was such a divine experience.
Great.
And I enjoyed every bit of it. And, you know, who knew that, you know, soon thereafter, concerts would not even be happening.
Yeah.
You know, like we are right now in this time that we're experiencing. So, but, you know, it's, that's how I wanted to give you that background about how I sort of came to know of you and of your guru. And, you know, such a blessed moments for me. As is this one. One thing I wanted to, you know, usually when I do these kind of interviews, we usually start from the beginning. And when we say the beginning, it's like people have different beginnings in their life, new beginnings. but I mean, like the earthly beginning when you're young, when, from your chronologically in your age. So what I would want to know from you is, after reading your book, I have an understanding and of, when you look back on your childhood, you probably don't have many pleasant, or you have more maybe unpleasantness, but and I don't want to go too much into that, but I wanted to know, what is it that you found peace in, or somewhat of happiness in, uh, during your childhood? Like, what was it that helped you escape before you obviously, came into contact with anything spiritual? What was your something that you really enjoyed doing that gave you something to look forward to?
I would say music and basketball.
Oh, wow.
They were the. I was a maniac for basketball. That's all I wanted to do.
Did you play?
I used to. Now it's a few years ago. I used to play.
Yeah.
I actually got a scholarship to college in basketball, but uh, in my senior year, I tore up my leg, and
Hmm.
I didn't get in shape, and I didn't play, much in my senior. So they took the scholarship back.
Hmm.
So that changed my life because it was a scholarship to a well-established college, and there's no way I would have made it there. I was too crazy. So, so what happened is I decided to. Used to be these ads in the back of comic books for like $10. You could buy a kit to build an army motorcycle, like an army Harley motorcycle, like spare parts and stuff. So my friend and I were going to build a motorcycle and drive it out to Washington and become lumberjacks. Because when they took the scholarship back from the college, I had no plans to go anywhere else, so I was just not going to go to college. So then one day, I got a call from the coach of this college. He was the first. They were starting a basketball program, and he said to me, "So, what are you doing for?" And I said, "Well, I was going to go to Brandeis, but they took the scholarship back." "Oh, so do you want to come here?" And he said, "So, what are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to go be a lumberjack." So the guy said to me, "Don't you want to play basketball?" Yeah, I really did want to play basketball. So I applied to that school. It was a state school, so I got in easy. And but it was at that school, at that college, that I connected with uh, people who were interested in spiritual things
Hmm.
more deeply. I was already connected with things. I was already, trying to meditate and doing asana, and uh, I read Autobiography of a Yogi and the Gospel of Ramakrishna and Zen and Japanese culture, and I was really like, but what are you going to do? There's no. They're books and they're great, but what are you going to do? There's no. So through a friend at that college that I went to,
Hmm.
a couple of years later, I met his brother, actually, who just called me today, funnily enough, after a long time. So, and they invited me to come help take care of their farm in upstate New York. And while I was there, that guy told me about Ram Dass.
Ah.
And then I went to meet Ram Dass, and that was essentially the very beginning of the rest of my life. I walked into the room where Ram Dass was sitting,
Yes.
and without eye contact, without a word being spoken, just boom,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, I knew that whatever it was I was looking for, and I don't know what to call it, but whatever it was real. It was
Wow.
in the world, and you could find it.
Yeah.
And that was it was like all the lights went on for a minute. They went off again, but they went on for a minute, and you saw, and that changed everything.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I was going to lead into the meeting with Ramdas because, you know, we look at today's world where we have all this technology and we're able to connect and speak and hear each other like this. You know, that was probably very inconceivable back then.
Yeah.
And, you know, the stuff we can do on our phones and at our fingertips, we can do anything really to reach anybody in the world. But, you know, that's the technology that came and evolved later. But what amazes me is this eternal technology that was there then, that is there here now, and it's always going to be.
Yeah.
Just this spiritual connection that people can make. And it amazes me when I think about, you know, people are fascinated by what we're doing today. I feel fascinated by what you went through and how you met your guru and how you came in the presence of Ramdas and felt something like that. I mean, I can't imagine in that time when there was really no social media, or there's none of these things where people can reach out and advertise themselves. You know, and somebody who's oceans away, you know, who can touch you in that manner, and you've never even met that person. You know,
Well, you think you haven't, but you know, those great beings,
yeah,
they are not limited to the body consciousness. They don't identify with this little pocket or this balloon full of pus and shit and crap. You know, they're not identified with that. They're wherever they want to be. They're everywhere. And so they pull the strings and they rearrange things the way they have to be arranged.
yeah,
We just, because we don't have that kind of vision, we can't imagine it.
yeah,
But that's, from their point of view, you know, it's all easily done. It's just a question of they just have a thought and everything happens. But from our point of view, of course, it looks very amazing that these things happen. And of course, they are really amazing. But, you know, Maharaji said something once that was very interesting. He said, beings come already taught by God. Program is running. You know? We have all these ideas about it. Yada, 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 yada. But it's irrelevant. Program is running.
yeah,
And it's running the way it should be running and the way it's going to run. And it's going to keep running until it makes a full circle. So the question is to get with that program and out of this program, you know.
yeah, absolutely. Question about like the Westerners who went to India, like yourself, to meet Maharaji. Do you feel like most of them were sort of from the Ramdas pipeline, or were there different outlets to get to Maharaji? Did other Westerners just come there through different influences, or were there other people like Ramdas that in different areas, maybe of the states, that you know, may have brought their friends to India that way to meet him?
Not really. But, you know, in those days in India, it was quite extraordinary. Every time the seasons changed, people from the south would come to the north, the people from the east would come to the west, the people from the north would come to the middle, and the different groups of Westerners would meet and talk and exchange information. And then they would change, you know, they would, oh, I want to meet that Baba. Oh, I want to meet that Baba. I want to go there. I want to see that. And then they would move off. So once that started in India, the information was passed like that from group to group, person to person. So at first it was a fairly, like a group of maybe, well, me and Danny Goldman and Ramesh Radas, Jim Litton, we were the first three that wrote to K.K. Shah, Ramdas's friend, Maharaji's disciple. And so we were the first three to go that way. Others followed shortly, and you know, within a short period of time, there were maybe 15, 20 people, and then the word would go out in India to other people and go back to in other parts of the world. People would show up and come. So it was quite an incredible scene. Shiva Balayogi was down in Bangalore. Baba Muktananda was in the south, in Maharashtra. The Tibetans were coming over the mountains, into India. It was Deora Baba, who was there in Uttar Pradesh, who was 270 years old at the time. There was a lot going on, and people were drawn to different groups, different Babas, different beings. Anandamayi Ma was there.
Yes.
In that time, it was an incredible period. So the seeds were being planted. The seeds, the karmas unfold as they're going to unfold for all of us, and it's just quite amazing the way it works. Yeah,
Truly is. Truly is. And it's very interesting to hear this because, again, today there are so many outlets for these for the gurus who are doing their work today. There's YouTube and there's Zoom and so many and these social media outlets, obviously, to be able to reach people and communicate with people and all that. But it's amazing to me how your guru was somebody who really didn't lecture or do any of these things. Never put himself out there and never really traveled outside of India.
No.
with some sort of a mission like my grandfather did. So I'm just amazed at how people were drawn to him, like he was a giant magnet, and people just got attracted to that.
Wherever he went, wherever he sat down,
Yeah.
it became a city in no time at all. They used to call him Tatiwala Baba, latrine Baba, because the first thing we'd build was latrines, because hundreds and hundreds and sometimes thousands of people would come. What are they gonna do? So first thing he built in any place he went was latrines.
Wow.
And of course then a kitchen was built and people were fed. Everyone who came to the temple was fed a full meal. Everyone who came, either to take away in a little baggie or sit down and have prasad. And he forbid people to write about him. He absolutely forbid. K.M. Munshi, who he was? He was a very spiritual man. He was the governor of UP for many years. He loved Maharaji very much. And one time he wrote an article for some magazine or newspaper about the saints of India. And there was one little line somewhere in the middle of it. Said, but the greatest saint I've ever met was Neem Karoli Baba. Maharaji would not see him until he was on his deathbed. He wouldn't go. And then he showed up right before he died and gave him darshan and Tig Ho Jayega. So he didn't want any publicity. He didn't need it. He wasn't functioning on the human level like that. The people who came, he drew them to him. The people that, when it's time to go, he used to say, Jao is my mantra. One time, one of his close devotees brought a friend of his who had another guru. And he came to meet Maharaji, and they came to the temple, and they sitting in front of Maharaji and said, what did you come here for? Your guru's place is so nice. There's bhajan, kirtan, seva, everything goes on. Here it's just ow, cow, jow.
Yeah.
Come, eat, go. That was it. There was nothing special. But the feeling of being home, being with your closest, with your family, that he used to say, when you come here, you don't need to do seva to eat. Everything is given to you. You want to cook, here's pots and pans, whatever. You should feel like you've come to your grandfather's house. This is because that's what it was about, love and only love. You didn't have to do anything to deserve it. It wasn't like that. It was, and even for the Westerners, we felt the same. We felt like we'd come home,
Yeah.
Amazing.
Amazing. So, um, on a earthly level, on a human level, how was it to communicate with Maharaji? Because it seems like he probably, you know, he didn't speak in English, right? You guys, how did you guys communicate?
Well, there was always someone who could speak English, but he didn't need you to tell him what you were feeling. Sometimes
Yeah.
that would happen. You would say something. You would ask him something. But when we were with him, for the most part, we didn't want to talk. We didn't have any questions. We were immersed in that love,
Mm.
and and but sometimes somebody had something they wanted to say, so there was a translator or something, and uh, but he would answer all your questions, from inside. He didn't need to be. We never felt we couldn't communicate with him. There was never any problem like that. I don't know why, but we never felt that it was a problem. There was usually, somebody could speak enough English to get a few things if we had to,
Mm.
but 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 for the most part, it wasn't necessary, because in those days, those people who were there with him in those times,
Mhm.
we didn't have lives. We were all young. We didn't have problems. We didn't have families. We didn't need jobs. We didn't want anything. We just wanted to stay and stare at him. That's all we wanted in our lives. So where was the problem?
Yeah.
Yeah, things would come up, and if you needed to ask him something, okay. But it wasn't like the Indians really had lives, and they had real problems. And my child is sick. My I've lost my job. How will I feed my family? Real problems in life, and he would always deal with those. But we didn't give a shit about anything. All we wanted to do was sit there and look at him. That was it. Very interesting. And he used to say to the Indians, "You people come here, all you want is kids and jobs and money and all these things. Look at these people. They've come from so far away. All they want is God." And we think like, he's talking about us? What's he talking about? We didn't know what God, we didn't know anything. All we know was that this is what we wanted to be, in this presence, in this love. We didn't want to leave that. But but we also couldn't stay. Our minds wouldn't let us stay. The vasanas of our minds would not allow us to remain in that presence, whether we were with him physically or not. And so time would come when we were transferred back into our lives. And that's when we began to try to figure out how to stay in that presence. And for me, that became the chanting practice, kirtan. That was the way I kept entering more deeply again and again into what I call his presence, but you call it the presence, that being, your true nature,
Right.
the soul. So he, yeah. I'm
So,
very interested. Wait, I want to ask you a question. So
go
tell me
ahead.
a little bit how your grandfather approached what he, how he, what he was felt he was transmitting to people, and how what he felt about uh, the sadhana and the practice and that kind of thing.
Yeah, from a very young age, it was something that was innate in him to do the Harikathas. He used to do the Harikathas, um, which is usually telling the divine stories or the
Mm,
stories of the Lord, the pastimes of the Lord, if you will. Uh,
sure.
and and he would play the harmonium, and he would be telling the stories, and then he would suddenly go into a song that is relevant to that story.
Mm.
And he also had the vision of Lord Panduranga uh,
Oh,
in Vishakhapatnam, when where the where there's a beach there, and he was walking there, and he saw Lord Panduranga actually walking on the beach. So
wow.
his style was completely like uh, singing and telling stories, and of course, chanting and meditating and doing peaceful chants and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how people, it seemed like sort of came to him organically, or they had heard about him or something,
Mm-hmm.
once he started coming in and they started following him. And he had an incredible following. He did, I think, about 40 plus global tours in Europe and different yoga centers and things like that. And so for him, I think for him it was just, he that was his way of doing it,
Mm-hmm.
storytelling and the singing. But he used to write his own bhajans a lot.
Uh-huh.
He was always creative. There was some creativity coming along all the time. In
Uh-huh.
fact, we did a Mahasamadhi virtual meet in December for him, and his devotees were, some of them were in this, and they were telling me how, like, on the way to something, he would suddenly write a bhajan and he would sing it, on the fly, and he would be in ecstasy, and there
Mm.
would be tears coming down and all this stuff. And the guy who was telling the story, he said, "I don't know how I drove home that day with all that going on
Mm.
in the car."
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
like, "I don't know." Guruji went into ecstasy, and I couldn't, but it was such a beautiful bhajan that I had to go home and tell my wife to get the lyrics to that bhajan. We wanted to remember that bhajan.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So,
Beautiful.
and he
Yeah.
wrote a lot of books, Gayatri, the highest meditation. He gave a lot of people initiation into Gayatri,
Mm-hmm.
and even women,
Mm-hmm.
because usually in our culture, we usually only have that sacred thread ceremony for males.
Yeah.
But he did all kinds of initiations for people based on what he felt, which deity he felt, this person
Mm-hmm.
had some connection with.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever mantra would work for them, for whatever their need is at that time.
Mm-hmm. Great.
But he
Great.
touched a lot of people, and
Beautiful.
yeah. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, sure, sure. Did Saint Keshava Das have a guru that he spoke of?
No, not really, not
Uh-huh.
really. We do have our mutt, what we call, like, our family lineage and all that. We actually come from the Madhvacharya lineage.
Madhavacharya. Acha. Uh-huh.
Madhvacharya, yes.
Uh-huh.
But he didn't have any guru who taught him anything. It was
Right.
really from that age of 7 or 8 that he was already starting to do harikathas in the temple, local temple. And he
Mm-hmm.
had many siblings and he didn't have a father. He had many siblings and his mother, who basically he fed and supported, and financially supported through his harikathas. So
Mm.
to me, it's like, that's just that was him. That was
Yeah.
his purpose of life.
Yeah.
He took that divine birth,
Sure.
and that was his, and then he kind of carried forward. Now, he did educate himself. He was
Mm-hmm.
he did get a law degree.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not like and he was always, I remember whenever he would come to visit us, he would always be reading books that are not spiritually related. He would
Mm-hmm.
always be reading science books and this and that stuff that I would be reading for school.
Uh-huh.
And I'd be like,
Oh.
why do you need to read this stuff? I would always ask him, I'm like, your mind is somewhere else. Why are you reading this? And he says, because, it's always good to be educated and informed. It's always good to learn. And
Sure.
I think that was really a lesson to me, because I feel like he already knew all this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
like you're saying, Maharaji knew everything, it's sort of like that. It's like that knowledge was there, but he was just showing me an example that don't ever feel like, you're not going to, you just know everything. You have to put your work into it, and
Yeah.
do the due diligence and learn, and try to research things as much as
Yeah.
possible.
Mm-hmm.
So
Cool.
that's how I look at it now. Back then,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought, oh, he must really want to know what this is all about, so he must,
Yeah.
but it was cool, and he was a jovial person, childlike, always hey, let's get some apricots. We're in the airport seeing him off and he's like, he wants to buy something, some nuts or some trail mix or something. And he's like, hey, everybody make sure you get some of this,
Mm,
always loving,
mm,
and
beautiful.
that's just how all of these people are. They have their
Yeah.
own styles of what they do to give the message, but which is interesting to hear about Maharaji also, because that shows me how diverse. Because when we think about the human beings, everybody said we're all different, we're all unique in our own ways. Nobody's the
Mm,
same, exact same, right? So even in this sphere where
mm,
we're talking about divine beings, they're all doing their work in different ways,
mm.
but they're still touching everybody the same way, sort of. It's like that love that you were talking about.
Yeah.
It was transmitted from each and every one of these individuals,
Yeah.
you know, but just different styles,
Yeah.
which keeps it interesting, right?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Everyone manifests in their own way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Krishna Das, tell me about your name. How did you get your name? Because my grandfather did the same thing. He would name everybody
Uh-huh.
something based on whatever he was feeling about them at that time. Maybe even
Mm-hmm.
it had something to do with what their American name started with. Like
Mm.
somebody named Kathy would be Karuna,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
something like that. So how did you get your name?
Well, Ramdas had, we were all in India there, and Ramdas had bought a Volkswagen bus
Mm,
from this couple who were traveling around. And we were using that bus to go to Kenchi to see Maharaji every day from Nainital, which is the town we were staying in.
okay.
And there were about 20 of us. And we would pile into this Volkswagen bus. We were standing, holding on to the roof, on the roof, out the windows. It was really quite a scene.
Mm,
And so one day Maharaji looked at Ramdas and says, Ramdas, you're a saint. You have to take the public transportation.
mm,
Jeff will drive. Give him the keys. My name was Jeff. So Ramdas had to give me the keys to the bus. So from that point on, oh my goodness, I can't really remember when I got the name, but maybe it feels like it was at least 3, 4 months. He would call me Driver. My name was Driver. Driver, come here. Driver, this, Driver, that.
yeah.
So finally, and everybody else had Indian names, this Das, that Das, this, that. And I was Driver. So one night, I wrote in my diary, well, I guess it'll always be Driver. Not bad. That's. So the next day, I go to the temple. I get called into Maharaji's room. He looks at me and says, Arjun, nay, Krishna, nay, Krishna Das. I said, Krishna Das? What is this Krishna Das? I'm a Hanuman guy. What is this? I'm a Ram guy. What? And he laughed. He said, nay, 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 koi baat nahi. He said, Hanumanji served Krishna too.
Hmm.
And so I became Krishna Das. And it's a funny story. Hanuman did, of course, he served Krishna too in many ways. But at the end of the Mahabharata war, Arjun tells Krishna, they drive off to the side, and Krishna says to Arjun, he says, "Oh, tonight is different than all the other days. Every day, as your charioteer, I would get off the chariot first and help you off. But today, you get off first and run as fast as you can, as far away as you can from the chariot." So Arjun jumps off and he runs away. Now, there was a white flag on the chariot with a red monkey in the flag. That
Mm,
was Arjuna's, what do you call it? His flag.
yes.
And so Arjun jumps off. Krishna steps off the chariot. The monkey flies out of the flag and disappears into the sky, and the chariot exploded in 1,000 pieces. And Krishna explained to Arjun, he said, didn't you ever wonder why in the whole war your chariot was never destroyed while all the other warriors had to keep replacing their chariots? because they used to fight with atomic bombs. The mantric force in the arrows, where they were like, you know. He said, "Didn't you ever wonder?" He said, "Hanuman was protecting you and absorbing all those arrows, all those missiles,
Yes.
and now he's jumped off, and so now the chariot explodes."
Yeah.
So, and there was some other time that Hanuman somehow came where Krishna was with with Rukmini, and he he looked, and he was, and Krishna said, "Oh, I know what you want," and he turned himself and Rukmini into Sita Ram and Sita.
Yes. And gave that darshan,
Gave,
that
gave
avatar.
that darshan because it was his beloved. That was
Yeah.
that's what that was his main.
Yes.
But there's no difference, people who
None.
make a big deal about that. There's no difference between Krishna and Ram.
Absolutely.
Different incarnations for different times with different rules and regulations. Period. Same being.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's one of the problems that people who quote unquote believe in God, uh, yeah, they often quarrel over who's greater than the other, which deity is better than this one, who's the stronger one, who's the higher one,
Yeah.
and make
Oh,
all
that's
these divisions.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just the biggest bullshit in the world because if
Yes.
anyone knew God,
Yeah.
they would know that there's only one being of which we're
Right.
all a part, and and all differences are a question of your own subjectivity.
Yes.
And if you're persecuting other people because of your own subjectivity, this is your own ego,
Yeah.
and good luck because it's not good karmas.
Yes.
So it's just human beings are
Yeah.
just human. What are you going to do?
You know,
Yep.
Krishna Das, that's actually one thing I'd like to kind of come back to your question about my grandfather, because he had read and understood all the different philosophies there were, the different Vedantic philosophies, the different schools of thought, Chaitanya and Madhva and Ramanuja and all of these, right? And not to mention, Islam, Sufism, and Christianity, Catholicism, all of it. So he used to bring all of it in a unified way. And that was how I think people loved him, was because he never condemned and said, "Oh, this is the way," or "I'm only going to tell you about Hindu gods only. Everything else is separate." No, no, no. It's all. That's why we call Temple of Cosmic Religion meant that,
Yeah.
was really all what you know as mainstream religions. They're all part and parcel of this world, and it's all the same. It's all the
Yeah.
same. Let's not divide each other. Let's bring ourselves together. And
Yeah.
he used to bring the stories of, and he wrote a book about Bible and Bhagavad Gita, where
Hmm.
he wrote about both of them,
Hmm.
in the same text, and how people should look at it as similar or same message, you know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
not always, trying to decipher or, dissect, oh, this is, how can I make myself different from somebody? It was
Yeah.
that was not the point. So
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to share as well, sort of
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
relation to what we were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how was it traveling with Maharaji within India? I know he traveled to different
We
places.
didn't travel with him.
Okay.
The Westerners, I don't think, very rare that Westerners traveled with him. He'd usually disappear,
Hmm.
and one day we'd be sitting with him, and we'd been in the same place with him for weeks, and he'd get up, he'd walk across the courtyard, and instead of going into his little office room, we called it, he would make a right turn, walk out of the courtyard, over the bridge, get into a waiting jeep, and drive away. And it was like, what?
Yeah.
Nobody knew when he was coming back.
Yeah.
It could be a day, it could be an hour, it could be a week, it could be 3 months. But then word would get around, oh, maybe he went to Vrindavan, or he might gone to Allahabad, or this place or that place, and then telegrams would start flying around from the devotees.
Yeah.
So I didn't travel with him. but I saw him many different places.
Mm.
Um,
And it was almost like always like an organic thing. Like I'm just wondering, nobody knew he was gonna go anywhere. Was it just a spur of the moment decision? Like I'm just gonna go somewhere today, or
I
how?
can't speak for what his motivation or what he thought about it.
Yeah.
Usually, he told. Sometimes he didn't tell, necessarily.
Mm.
He knew how to keep secrets. Like if he needed to do something, he would tell one person, like, I want you to show up outside that house that he was visiting at 2 a.m. Have a car, just sit there, don't say anything, don't let anybody know. And then Maharaji would escape out the back door, get in the car, and drive away. So he knew how to play it. He was,
Mm.
and then everybody would go crazy until they found him again,
Yeah.
So.
I know being in his presence itself was a mystical experience, but I think when most people think of mystical experiences, somewhere they want to hear about miracles or something that you wouldn't think would be humanly possible, or some supernatural things happening. So can you tell me something that you experienced with Maharaji that really stands out in your mind, that was miraculous in nature, where you're like, I can't believe I just saw that.
Well, you can't prove anything to anybody. Something that one
Yeah.
person sees as a miracle. So we're talking about me driving. So my secret desire was to drive Maharaji somewhere, sometime in the car. I never said anything to anybody. I never said anything to Maharaji, but I always had the keys with me 24 hours a day. I never left those keys somewhere else. I always had them. So one day we're in Allahabad, and I'm sitting there in the room, everybody's sitting around. Maharaji just looks at me and goes, "Chabi hai? You have the keys?" I said, "Zaru." "Chalo." We got up, went outside. Dada, his devotee, walked out with him, opened the car. And the Volkswagen bus is high. It's not a low seat. It's a high seat, it's a higher. And Maharaji was very short. So in order to get up in the seat, he had to throw himself up into the seat, kind of.
Mhm.
And he bashed his head on the top of the door jamb, the top of
Oh,
the frame of the door.
yeah, yeah.
And I went crazy. I went, holy shit, my desire to drive Maharaji resulted in him, bashing his head. Oh, this is terrible. I
Yeah.
said to Dada, "Dada, did you see that?" Now, Dada was a great devotee. He looked at me and said, "Just drive." He did that on purpose. Just drive.
Hmm.
He did that on purpose because in Dada's universe, everything that Maharaji did was on purpose. There were no accidents.
Yes.
Everything he did, he did. Everything that happened, he did.
Mhm.
So, okay. So it's just me and Maharaji in the car. And he's saying, "Okay, Sangam Jello." So I drove to the Sangam, the whole way. He's sitting in the car. "Watch out. You're going too fast. Somebody's coming. Be careful. Watch out. There's a car. There's a person. Watch out. Too slow. Too fast. Watch out." The whole way to the... I pulled up to the Sangam. We stopped. I turned the car off.
Mm.
We sat there for a moment, maybe a minute or two at the most. And the man says, "Oh, wabasha. Let's go back." So same thing on the way back. Watch out. Oh, we get back to the house. He goes in the house. Okay. So the next day, within the next day or two, me, Ramdas, and a couple other guys, we were jowed because Ramdas had told Swami Muktananda that he would go on a yatra with him in South India.
Mm.
And he tried to get out of it. He didn't want to go. But Maharaji said, "You said you'll go, you'll go." So, so we left. And I was driving, coming out of Allahabad, somewhere on the GT road. I don't remember exactly where we were. But there was we came into this big turn, a big curve in the road. And I was going way too fast. And on this side, there was a big reservoir, a big water, big,
Yeah.
and we entered this turn, this curve, and I couldn't control the car. We were sliding across the road, and we were going to go right into the reservoir.
Oh my God.
And at the last minute, this whoosh, this huge wind came and blew the car all the way back across the road onto the,
Ah,
and at that moment, I remembered Maharaji hitting his head on the car.
wow. Wow.
So,
Incredible.
and so, I mean, I can't prove it to you, right? But I knew that's what happened.
Mm.
But there's another funny story I could tell you. But so when we left, before we left Allahabad on the way to the south, Maharaji said he'd meet us in Vrindavan. So on the way south, we stopped in Vrindavan, and we were just hoping that he would be there so we wouldn't have to go all the way down there. But he wasn't there, so we had to go. And we were gone a couple of 3 weeks, I think. And we were driving back north, and we decided to stop in Vrindavan. Maybe he'd be there, and we'd meet him there. So we got to the area very late at night, and we slept at the Janambhumi, Krishna's birthplace, just outside of Vrindavan, between Mathura and Vrindavan.
Okay.
And we get up in the morning, and we start to drive to the temple. I was driving. Now, you come up on the Mathura road, and you have to make a right turn onto the Parikrama road just at the beginning of Vrindavan. For some reason, I missed the turn. And we had to go all the way around through the bazaar, right? And it took us, let's just say, an extra 15 minutes. There were carts, there were cows, there were people, these narrow lanes. We're trying to get through with this Volkswagen bus. You know, it was just insane. So let's just say we were 15 minutes late. We get to the temple. We get out of the bus. We walk into the temple, and we ask the pujari, is Maharaji here? Maharaji? We haven't seen him in months. We don't know where he is. Oh, my God. We were devastated. Now what are we going to do? I mean, we have no clue where he is. It was just horrible. I mean, the whole way we were driving, we were thinking, oh, he'll be there. This is going to be so great,
Yeah.
So we come out of the temple, and we get into the car, close the door. I put the key in the ignition. I'm just about to turn the key, and this little Fiat pulls up next to us, and right next to us, and Maharaji gets out of the passenger seat, and he gets out of the car. The car, it's 2 feet away from our car, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the passenger seat is on the side I'm sitting, because it's a right-hand drive and a left-hand drive. So anyway, so he gets out of the car and he walks into the temple.
Yeah.
He did not even look at us.
Wow.
He didn't look at us. And we were just like, wow. So we ran into him. We had the greatest 3 days with him ever. It was so great. We were just alone with him almost for 3 days. So now, many years later, like 10 years later or more, one of his great devotees, Gurudas Sharma, I was hanging out with him, and he said to me, did I ever tell you what happened that night, that day that we met you in Vrindavan? It turned out he was in the car too with Maharaji. I didn't even know. I mean, I just saw Maharaji.
Yeah.
He said, we had been in Kanpur. I think it was Kanpur. And Maharaji had retired for the night, and all the devotees were sleeping in the big room, shoulder to shoulder, boom, boom, boom. He said, Maharaji came out of his room and tried to wake me up, but I didn't wake up. So he picked me up and put me over his shoulder, and he carried me out of the house and put me in the back seat of this car. And I woke up after a couple of hours, what's going on? And they told me, So we drove all night, and we drove super fast all night long to Brindavan. All night long. He said, just before Brindavan, Maharaji says, Roko. He said, stop the car. So the driver pulled over and stopped. And he said, I thought must be a pee stop or something, you know. But no, Maharaji just sat there in the car. Nobody moved for 15 minutes. And then Maharaji says, Chalo. Do you realize? He timed that to meet us at the moment of our greatest despair.
Wow.
I'm telling you, I was just about to turn the key and drive away.
Yeah.
If he'd been a minute later, we would have been gone.
Yeah. Amazing.
Or if he'd been 5 minutes earlier, we wouldn't have seen him. And if he had left.
Yeah.
This is what he was doing all the time. And somebody else might not think that's a big deal, but it's like this. It's like there's this Buddhist saying that if you can see which way the wind is blowing from the way the grass bends, then you can appreciate his teaching. You know, you can't see the wind,
right?
But if you can. So this is what it was. Time after time, every day, these things were happening until you just started living in this place where it's all open, it's all okay, it's all right, it's all known. There's nothing to hide from. There's nothing to. He can do whatever. And the point of all that was to just give us faith.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to deepen our connection and our faith.
Yeah. So whenever you were in Maharaji's village, would he always be sitting out and giving you guys darshan? Like, how much time did you guys, like, how was it like every day? Like, I mean, I know you guys were living in Nainital and coming there. And, what was it like daily? Was it a different experience every day, or like amount of time you would get with him would be different?
It was, in some ways, it was pretty standard. Usually we'd have some darshan in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
the late morning, and then in the late afternoon we'd have some darshan, and then we would go, Gari agai, bus has come.
Mm.
The last bus had come down from the hills on the way to Nainital.
Mm.
And if we don't get on that bus, we're in the temple all night long. And he didn't want that. So the driver was a devotee, and he would stop outside the temple and wait for us.
Mm.
Sometimes a half an hour before we could get out there. There's other people on the bus. But Maharaji says, wait, I wait. So we'd be with Maharaji, and then he said, Ab jao, bus has come. So, but then later in the spring, summer, and fall of 72, there were 5 of us living in the temple, 5 Westerners.
Mm.
And so after the rest of the Westerners would leave, in the evening he would come out again. And we would spend time with him. It was the sweetest time. And the sun was setting. The air was sweet and soft. It was just a beautiful time. One time I was sitting with him, and I thought to myself, wow, it's so quiet. It's so quiet. How beautiful. And he was leaning like, he turned over to me. He said, Deko, watch this, see this. And he said, very casually asked one of the Indian devotees, what time is it in America? So the guy started to answer, and then somebody else said something, In about 10 seconds, it was chaos. Oh, it's 9 o'clock there, but it's 4 o'clock. America's becoming different. Everybody's yelling over everybody. Maharaji just turns and looks at me like, you see what's in people's heads? Things like that all the time, you know.
Yeah. It's amazing. So now we come to the point where, like, you know, you come back to the States, or Maharaji tells you that you have attachment back in America. Uh,
I didn't know what he was talking about.